Right, so let's make a start and see if we can make as much noise as possible in here so that all the people out there think, what's going on in here? Right, so the first session in the Innovation Think Pavilion, but first of all, let me talk about the concept behind this. This is really new for us at Craig, so I guess you guys are the guinea pigs. But really what we wanted to do is start to be able to have more unstripped conversations. Please don't quote me on that. So we could have some stripped back conversations on everything that's going to happen at Craig. And then what we want to do is do some think pieces from this. Jason and I have talked about articles and FAQs and things like that. So what we're doing in here is, for this very first session, I'd love to introduce my very dear friend, Jason. Jason has been working with us on the innovation procurement system, which is a legacy thanks Mr. Martin Duffy. And what Jason's going to do, he's going to talk, first of all, just about some of the innovation buying problems that he sees more generally in the sector. And then we're just going to sort of open it up to a number of sort of people who are here and just sort of get some of the insights that your challenges are. And the idea is that through Craig, we can find a really good way of trying to smooth that sort of challenges that we have. So I guess actually, Jason, one of the questions I'd really like to ask you is, you've now been working with Craig around the innovation procurement for forever almost?
3 years?
Yeah, 3 years. How's it been?
It's been challenging. It's been innovative. Martin called me up and said, we're going to stand up a dynamic purchasing system and we're going to do it in 3 weeks. 3 years later, we have something that works. Innovation hasn't been a rapid and easily adopted challenge, mainly because of organizational barriers. The idea of the IPS was to create control for the highways group to buy what they want to buy with as least amount of procurement intervention as required. Not that procurement is a barrier, but in reality, you're buying something that isn't being bought on a price quality. It's 100% quality most of the time when you're buying innovation, because it's innovative by definition. So you're not necessarily putting in a competition 2 suppliers or 3 suppliers against each other. How do you compare them? And to be honest with you, Paula, especially our medium-sized and smaller councils who are very, very efficient, their biggest challenge is understanding that it is a very different idea of thinking about value. That they want to do something different, but they're actually comparing what that is inside a specification for innovation to what they're doing currently. And that seems to be the major trade-off. Do I do something different with something that is proven but not yet at scale, because it's not on a framework and there's not more than 1 or 2 providers in the country that do it? So that I've had numerous conversations, many hours, and it always seems the asset manager that says, okay, what's my price quality split again? And I'm like, no. What are you going to compare apples and oranges and get the same price? So that's been an interesting and tremendously. I don't think we expected that challenge when we started the project.
And I think the thing that I've noticed is that this has been a sort of a learning sort of curve for ourselves and other organizations. But I think the biggest challenge for me is just that innovation is sometimes fast. It's sometimes messy, sometimes it is unproven. So, there are a lot of authorities that rely on trials, and then the trials don't then move into sort of innovation as purchase. So, and we see a lot of that. Are you starting to see a shift in how that is happening? Are more people prepared, or are they actually retreating back and just relying on trials?
Well, so with a council that shall not be named, the debate is, what is a trial? So I think our focus is talking about scaling something that's proven And we have many organizations that DFT has been supporting, Innovate UK, the whole innovation supply chain, which has proven something, but then we hit the wall, the trial wall. So the goal is to go from trial to scale. So if it's been proven, you have the numbers. The issue is that you can't access it because public procurement 2015 and the new, which comes in October, doesn't give you a route to market. So you can't get over that legally without, in essence, taking the risk of issuing a sometimes very large RFP, which generally breaks local council procurement most of the time. So that's what the issue is saying is that legally, the IPS and the partnership with Crown Commercial does allow us to buy specifically that, almost like a catalog buy at scale without arbitrary limitations of 200 or 500,000 pounds.
But that in itself is quite interesting, is it at scale, when actually innovation sometimes is not about
Correct.
At scale.
So the question is, what is scale for highways? So let's take pothole as a service, which you have 4 different approaches here on the green for pothole as a service. How many potholes would it cost to do 10 kilometers on a B road or a C road? What's the cost of that? If it's, as some numbers we've used, upwards of 100 quid, let's just call it around 100 quid a pothole, all in traffic management and everything else, very quickly we see, as opposed to other sectors, very large numbers. With our colleagues at Crown Commercial, folks that were focused on the digital's quite cheap. Materials for asphalt and labor and getting £500,000 equipment isn't. So I think innovation is relative to the organization, innovation is relative to the contract, and innovation is relative to the size of the asset. So it's small, can be 10,000 pounds, but how many potholes do you get for 10,000 pounds as an example?
And I think that's the sort of, you picked up on a really interesting point there. I mean, aside from the fact we don't really want to talk about potholes per se here, but everyone has potholes. So where's the innovation in doing something that 40 councils might already be doing? How's that different for some than others? And, how you assess that? What suppliers, anything really? I mean, just plain
devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Huge question. So realistically, if you look at Andy Wild stood up, and let's use Andy and his team. Realistically,
Andy is at Shropshire.
Andy is head of infrastructure, assistant director of infrastructure now at Shropshire Council, and we're the ones to do our first major procurement on the IPS. And the specification was very clear. Wanted minimal traffic cost, so didn't want to do a lot of permitting, wanted it very, very fast. A roads, B roads, high-speed roads. Wanted to limit boots on the ground and move at a pace that existing commercial arrangements were not allowing to have happen. So the idea was to do about 5,000 potholes on those A and B roads to get their major network in very, very good condition so it can be sealed, and to do that over a very short period of time.
So the innovation was less about the thing, but about the approach.
It was a service,
right?
And it was a service. It was the tooling, it was the materials, it was the system. So pothole as a service. You're beginning to see it emerge here, as opposed to 2-man gangs cutting out the square, putting in, packing it down, rolling it out. So what is the tooling that enabled that to move fast in a safety critical position. So the safety issue was big in that case, and the speed and limiting traffic management was the innovative approach. There was also a materials aspect to that. Cracking, what kind of material elements would there be, especially around some of the utilities work. So that was a two-pronged approach in particular for that innovation.
And that, I guess somebody might say, well, why couldn't you just sort of procure that in a normal way, really?
In a normal way.
If that exists.
A normal way. Well, there's approximately, 250 frameworks that we have in the country. I do believe the suppliers who were awarded that do not exist on the vast majority of accessible frameworks at that time of scale.
And how normal is that?
I think for this lot here, fairly normal.
That's quite shocking, isn't it, really?
I think that's, if I may quote Martin for sitting there looking at me, realistically, access to market for something new is a major challenge for buyers, because you are either going to have to change council policy or buyer policy to allow that to happen. And how many times can heads of service go to procurement and say, I want to do that new and that new. So if you have 4, 5, 6 different types of things of different sizes, and you're constantly saying, let me go to market directly and not use a proven route, you run out of organizational capital after a while. So that, hopefully, the IPS solves that problem.
And actually, I think we've heard that quite a lot, haven't we, really? Yeah.
I hope so. We're not yet to a catalog buy for some innovation, but as things
will
mature.
We ever?
Well, depends on what the innovation is. So I've not seen the wheelbarrows here yet, but of course. But of course, they're a bit too small. But how much is a catalog buy that you would want to get in that is generally protected by intellectual property, but is not yet on a framework and is over delegated spend authority that you can't just buy because it makes sense? So I couldn't tell you exactly what those services are yet, but that's in essence, hopefully over the long term, where we begin to see more innovation, especially at the scale stage of a product or a service.
And let's talk about digital and innovation, because that is just, in some areas, outstripping. How do you, I guess, procure digital or sort of even AI innovation in a space that is just rapidly sort of moving now? That's going to be a massive buying problem, isn't it?
Let me understand what you're asking. So how do you buy it isn't the challenge. It's the what do you buy, in my view. Okay. So I was walking around. I think a third of the things I walked by were sort of digital businesses, aren't they? Everything from asset registers to, inspection in a box, I guess, right? Robot inspection. How do you buy that? I think a major challenge in the dozens of conversations we've had over the past year is how do you specify what success is for you? So each one of those suppliers have something that is unique that sets them apart. And let's just take asset data. There's, I think, 3 major providers in there, maybe 4. But all of them have something unique about how they provide it. So if your ecosystem, if your digital systems require data in a certain way, if it needs to come at a certain time, if it has something unique, then you can specify that. I couldn't tell you right now exactly what that specification is because it's relative to each organization.
And you know how I like playing devil's advocate.
I know you do. Yes.
But isn't every product here an innovation in some way? If it's different from a competitor?
Should. Well, hopefully at Elcraig. I hope so. But the question is it can be different, but is it relative and right for the organization? So time and time again, it comes back to you can change your binder. You can go to a net zero binder. You can do your recycling. So how do you change your service to align to your climate or net zero targets? That's been an interesting question. What are you specifying for risk, which gives you the asset quality, friction, all that type of stuff? We've proven that, but then there's a bunch of stuff that we're talking around. How do you do it at scale? Because the few providers of that have all have their own different way of doing it, but have not made it on a national framework. So there might be regional frameworks. There's so many I can't keep up. But for a new way of changing stuff we've done for 80 years, the question is how do we allow that to scale so unit price comes down, so it hopefully gives us a better whole life cycle cost. Hopefully.
Bear in mind that, LCRIG is very much as much about local authorities as it is sort of supply chain. What's the big piece of advice you would give in terms of preparing for your next purchase of innovation? Say you've walked around here today, you've seen something amazing, you've tended to use quite traditional ways of procurement. How should we prepare?
From the supplier perspective?
Yeah.
So the biggest challenge we have from the supplier's perspective, and I think many managing director would agree with me, is that they build really, really strong relationships, and then they stand at the door with their response to an outline proposal and say, you should choose me, but then we're back to then we have to do something special to choose you because I can't buy you in any other way. The IPS allows, unlike anything else in the sector, the ability to buy at speed, but you have to actually get yourself on it. And our categories are really, really broad, but actually getting that and doing the work to go through and qualifying and putting up your method statement to say why you're innovative, people aren't taking that up as quickly, and they're not working that into their relationship building. So if I was a managing director of an innovative infrastructure provider company, I would say, this is what I do for you. This is why I'm different. This is how it impacts the asset. And this is how you legally procure my services should you prove my innovation better than your status quo.
Okay. And what about from a local government perspective?
Well, if I'm the local government and I want to buy something, I look at the managing director and say, unabashedly, get on the IPS, go through the 159 questions and fill out the methodology statement. I would say, in the partnership with Crown Commercial, and in all of the public procurement I've done in my career, the digital experience that we have, which is an innovation for LCRIG and innovation for Crown Commercial, it is not the most intuitive. So put our hands up and say that we have to make that better, and it will get better. Fingers crossed. But you're talking about £1 million digital problems of improving that over the long haul. But if you take the time to read the guidance, and it's not terribly long, for both sides, public sector and private sector, it hopefully leads you through something that would take hours instead of days as it would for a significant framework.
But it does require reading the documentation.
Is this where I talk about the problems of being a middle-aged man and not reading?
Yes, let's talk about that.
Anyways, I joke, but the biggest challenge I've found is the number of times when I've asked, have you read the documentation? Did you start and did you go through it? Do you understand the base process? And people get so frustrated because they didn't read the manual, which is only 10 or 12 pages long. So I implore any of you, if you see anybody out there that says, oh, this is awful, just ask them to read the manual. Please, ask them to read the manual.
Brilliant. And actually, I think we'll just take a pause here.
Yeah.
So does there anybody here who has a particular sort of, I guess, buying problem that we can really throw at Jason? The more creative, the better, or just something that you're struggling with at the moment?
Don't give them all at once.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. You've all got it cracked. How amazing is that? But going back to technology, given that technology is moving so fast, and you talked about specifying things and specifying what you want, how do you do that and keep up with the pace of change? Or is that a myth, actually, that pace of change in terms of technological developments?
Well, it's not. So data is everything. So digital is data. The quality of data, your data culture, be it about your asset, be it about your operation, every project I do, the most important thing is, do I have good data? Do I trust it? How does it drive my decision making? That decision making forms an outcome spec. For 15 years, the biggest challenge is, do you specify the inputs? Well, with digital, I hope to goodness you would never do that. You might specify an output if you have a very, very specific alignment into your operating model, into your IT, into your business, the way it works, into your organization. But ideally, you would, in a hopefully qualitative way, specify as concisely as you can the outcome, and if you need to, a maturity plan of it. So a specification that I helped with a few months ago, we in essence said, we're buying this milestone 1 shall have an outcome in a digital sense of this data to achieve these decisions.
Could you give just a bit more detail? I mean, what, so, outcome and outputs can often get confused as it is anyway.
True. So inputs are, you will do this, and this is what good looks like, right? Traditional specifications. Output is defining the thing you get in your hand more in a quantitative space. So ideally, I want to cover X, let's just use surfacing. I want to cover X number of square meters, and I want it to have this friction, this whole life cycle, or this whole life cost, all that type of stuff. An outcome would go hopefully well beyond that, which in essence is more of a qualitative bit, which takes into the whole life cycle cost, the bigger picture. What are we trying to achieve with the stewardship angle? Now, in the digital space, that let's take the data piece for the same asset. The question becomes, if you run Confirm or some other asset management piece, what is your asset planning life cycle? What better decisions do you want to make? LTP4 has come out or due to come out, all these types of things. What are you trying to do with the behavior? So an impact to that recently is saying, I was having a conversation saying, if you want to change the use of your roads and adoption of public transport, how do you get the information of usage of your asset to have a transport plan that supports that appropriately and appropriately disincentivizes people from parking in your town centers?
But if you think about it, particularly with local authorities where, you are really coming to sort of the edge of things, do you find that people actually confuse that sort of output-outcome? Because the outcome is quite a leap, isn't it?
Very much.
From output.
I, being the idealist that I am, probably everybody in the room would agree, an outcome assumes a maturity of your business to know what good looks like in 24, 36, 48 months.
So it's a much, much shorter time frame in your perspective.
Ideally, because you're only going to buy on any of these the IPS, you're only going to buy for approximately 3 to 4 years. Commercially, it's only going to allow you to have that length. It's a 4-year with extension. So you want an outcome that's meaningful, and especially if we go back to your question, Paula, about digital. So if it's going to be digital, and if it's going to be digital and you want it to mature with your organization as you get better at dealing with the cost of management, you need to, shall we say, set some targets for your supplier. What does it look like in 12 months? What does it look like 18, 24? And do the work to define that.
Because what I often see at Elkrig is people will say, I want to buy that
Correct.
asset management system.
Correct.
Because it helps me here and now, but they don't think about that sort of beyond that point. Oh, so how would you, if you're not used to thinking in that way?
I don't think it's not used to thinking in that way. Does anyone know a public sector head of highways whose hair is not on fire, especially in this revenue world? I have great sympathies. Under-resourced, too many difficulties, and of course, ever-changing political sands. I think the best you can do, idealism aside, is there is a business plan. Every leader has an idea of where they want to be in 24, 36, 48 months. Encouraging that to be put into the commercial aspects as a way of studying the journey, shall we say, mapping the journey, is about as best I think we can do, to be honest. It's easy for me to say, not actually running the department, you should do it like that, but it's not pragmatic.
No, and I think it's easy to get into the trap of, this is a new system I need. These are the things I need to do now.
Correct. So there has to be a balance between stopping the bleeding and addressing the pain, which innovation isn't there, I would hope. I would hope that you would improve the status quo and stop the hemorrhaging, because I don't think there's an innovation here that fundamentally changes any highways organization. There's no magic pill in technology or service. So first and foremost, right service, right plans, right organization, right people. The innovation will allow you to go faster and hopefully lower your cost and increase your output. But it won't solve your organizational problems.
So it goes back to the point, how do I specify innovation then? Particularly if it's just about buying a system or process or...
Well, the how is methodology. I can give you a handout. The how is, what do I want? Why do I want it? When do I want it? And what does good look like at, choose arbitrary, 6, 12, 18 months? And it's relative to the organization. So I'm not being cagey. Innovation is relative to the problem you're trying to solve and the organization you're in. So that's where going through the specification process has been a bit more frustrating, I think, for people than I expected.
Really? Could you talk a bit more about that?
Ooh.
Go on.
What shall I say about that?
Obviously without, but
Yeah, so abstractly, what do you want and why do you want it? I think I have been, in all of these that we've done, Paula, I think I have underestimated the challenge of people understanding. They know they want the innovation, but then the combination of what do I tell who to get the innovation is a problem. So the procurement process is a challenge. This 5-step process, it's atypical. So we have to provide a bit more clarity for people who don't buy things as part of their job. So the asset manager, I made the assumption, who knew the 3 or 4 steps to provide that. Now specifying, again, most asset managers are going to know the innovation, why they want it. The second piece, though, is going through and actually writing that, as opposed to what I've seen people doing, which is taking the innovation off the shelf, or the specification off the shelf that's been there for time immemorial, refreshing it and putting it out. So I did underestimate the challenge of doing the analysis and taking the time to think that through. I still think it's hours, not days, but it's not a full new specification. It is saying, what do I want? Why do I want it? And writing that down. The few we have are 1.5 pages of being clear. And a lot of that is aligning to council requirements of net zero social value methodology, and being clear how that aids council strategy.
And again, if there's anybody from the audience who wants to put their hand up and ask a question there. Oh, look, we've got 2 here. Ian.
Hiya. Speaking to Jason quite a lot, in recent times, aren't we, about the IPS? And I'm happy for everyone to know that. And I'm also happy to talk about our challenges with the process. Not a problem. Just to be open. It's interesting that the concept of an IPS, a DPS, which is quite dynamic. So you can get something you want. In simple terms for me, you've got a framework which is a snapshot in time.
Yes.
Gets you the people you want then. Times move on. Things might change. The network might change. There might be a new innovation that comes out that serves the purpose you want on the network you talked about.
Yep.
It delivering exactly what you want. And I think you did a good summary there. What you want, when you want it. So can you use it at night? Is it less disruptive?
Mm-hmm.
Can you deliver a service that's, people go to bed, get up in the morning, and things have changed. So that's what we're trying to aim for at Blackpool in this particular scenario. But that's it's about options. So you have existing suite of treatments and things you can deliver on the network. We're talking about how infrastructure and maintenance now, and you set off and you live your working life like that. You deliver, spend your budget, deliver the benefit and value, and then something new will come along, and you think that serves that particular need or meets it better than what I can currently do.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want that thing.
Yes.
And I want it now.
Correct.
Yeah. And how do I do that? And the idea is that dynamically you can do that.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Through the DPS, through the so real quick, let me to step back for that. So IPS DPS, Innovation Procurement System, as defined under the LCRIG piece, is actually a collection of many routes to market. So there's traffic technology underneath there, which is a combination of things. And then there's a dynamic purchasing system that's on the Sprague DPS, which has a few different categories. So the umbrella term, IPS, is comprised of numerous agreements that come together. And in there's actually some frameworks around innovation, especially in the ITS space. So just so that people, because you use IPS and DPS, I'm trying to avoid the DPS IPS. Terminology, but yes, you're right.
So that's the appeal of it. It allows you to have a wider options range, and it also allows you to add options to your suite of what you need to do.
Spot on.
So that's exactly what we wanted to do. So you see a product or service that you currently can't access, and let's be honest, you've tried to access that thing if there wasn't an IPS via a convoluted route of a framework. You've got second-hand people, all that type of stuff, which you shouldn't have to do. And it's interesting you mentioned about outcomes and outputs. So they're quite clear in engineering terms. Both.
They can be. Yeah.
Yeah. But outcomes are also sit in a holistic pot of expectations that the public have or elected members have, or that. So you've got to take that into account, and it's definitely about now, next, and the future. So you do have to, whilst the climate's brought us down to small budgets, not a lot of time. So in local government, we're really good at getting right up to something and dealing with it, okay? Because we've had to, because you want to get the small budget awards over a short period of time, so you haven't had that chance to plan, which we're hoping we'll get with new funding. But you also got to bear in mind that when you pick that service and you deliver it on the network and you get the outcome and the output that you want short term, you've got to think about, what does that mean long term? How does that fit in with your strategy? Doing that, does it change what you're going to do in the future? And if it does, that's okay, but you've got to account for it. So rather than, that's what I was saying to the team, you've got to think about now, next, and future. The DPS, or the IPS, terminology, lets you do that. So for me and the guys, when you come here, or something like this, and you see it and think, that's a good thing, that would fit, they come back and go, that's great, how do I get it?
Correct.
And so simplistically for me, that's what it would let you deliver.
Exactly. You should be here. So, but what you highlight is the dynamic bit, right?
Yeah.
So I think the core problem is the fact that frameworks, all of our frameworks, and I think it was with your team that I had the conversation, the work to frame what you want is the same if you're standing up a framework or buying something on the IPS. You still have to go through the work of what do I want and how am I going to buy it? What's my unit of measure? What's my method of measurement? Am I buying it in time or material or square meters, whatever it is? So I think I said to Neil, one of your asset manager, the act of going through and making that decision will be the same. And if it's a predefined framework, your problem is a bit smaller, but in essence, you have a standing bill of materials. You've already defined how you're going to buy it, so you are pulling it off that framework. But the outcome piece, you still have to do. You still have to adopt it. You still have to hit your political storytelling, because why are you buying it? Why are you doing it differently? Why is it not standard? So the thing that I guess I would highlight there, Ian, is the thing that I find exciting is the dynamic thing. Early with Martin is how do you make it a curated, ever-changing, refreshing, growing thing, which I don't think we have anywhere in this country. In any sector. It tends to be a set it and forget it. And I think if we want this to grow, and for the idealist in me says, the public transport network, the public highway network is the most critical asset we have in our communities. So we want that to grow and be ready for, we got an autonomous car here. In my lifetime, I'm desperate to see it change at a rapid pace than we've ever seen.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, good morning, all. Martin Duffy. And I did work on the DPS in my previous roles within Elcrig, so I share your pain of this entire journey that we're on. I think, the learning that we've experienced as a result of this has been fabulous. I do feel that there's more learning yet for us to go through. In October this year, the new procurement bill 2023 becomes live, and it says scrap all your DPSs by October 2028. You can no longer use them. So there's an end date for any DPSs that exist. They've introduced a new thing called the dynamic markets. Now, dynamic markets have all been set up not purely, but one of the big changes is about the ability to access innovation. When Paula, you said, how do you specify innovation then? How does the client I don't think it's the client's job to specify it. You know what, when Aidan from Thermal Road Repairs invented his thermal road repair machine, he didn't do it because Ian said, I wanted a jointless finish on my trenches that you're doing. He brought it to Ian and said, have you seen this piece of kit, Ian? Have you seen what it can do? And he said, do you know what? We'll have some of that on our network. When Harry Pearl does his work with his mastic in the way which no client told him to go and do that, or no one told Multivo that I want a piece of kit which has all this interchangeable pieces of equipment that can do snow clearance, it can suck gullies, it can do all of these things. Multivo did it because they're so in terms of specifying innovations, I don't think it's about that. I think it's about the clients being here with the innovators and seeing what's available and saying, bloody hell, I didn't even know that existed. Do you know what? I want to buy it. The future then is about how do I buy it? The future is probably going to be through your dynamic market.
But we exist in a sector that's very traditional, isn't it, about its thinking. So actually, how do we get that shift in thinking from I have to specify this as a client to, it's out there, come and find it, come and buy it?
Paul, an opportunity for Elcrig is from the moment that the IPS comes to its natural term, which is 12 months or whatever it is, I can't quite remember what it is with Crown Commercial Services. Have a look at your dynamic markets, dynamic market system, and set a dynamic markets system up, and you tell every supplier here, all you got to do is submit this pre-qualification, and you're on it. how many suppliers have you got here? And it's about chicken and egg. You know, if they're not in a place that I can instantly go and procure, everything's, oh God, you know, and I've got to do this, and I've got to... Imagine if you had created the egg or the chicken, whichever it is, and they're all sat there in the coop, waiting to be accessed. So getting the suppliers on the board with no cost, no pain. So it could just simply be, you've got to be a gold member of construction line or equivalent thereof. You're instantly on it. So the rest of it then is about Ian and Dwayne seeing these things out here and saying, bloody hell, are you on that dynamic marketplace? And them saying, hey, yeah, we are. And do you know what? I'm going to now specify what it is I want to, because I've seen it. So I know I'm going to say I want a edgeless finish to my trenches. Specification, job done.
I agree with you. So you're talking about the ideation process. What's the problem I want to solve? Completely agree with you. So the challenge I put out there is it's the risk issue. So in the conversations I've been having, my dear sir, and you know far more people in the sector than I do, it's what with innovation, and I think we haven't talked about this, Paula, with innovation, in my personal opinion, the client takes the risk, right? It's not necessarily, if it's something that's unique and it's not yet fully at scale, unless it's something that is within intellectual property protections, and they're the only ones that can provide it. So the mastic type of stuff. You can only have a single supplier. It's under 70 years or whatever protections. Fine. It's a bit different. But if you're talking about a service, if you're talking about something, how do I buy it and against what risk am I willing to take? I think that's when I say specification and being clear, because how many heads of highways do you know who have to go to their portfolio holder and say, we're taking this risk?
The user has always got to accept the risk, I'm afraid.
100%.
The first time I had a piece of licorice and I bought it from a shop, I had to tell myself I was going to like it. My first pint of beer, I had to tell myself I was going to... Do you know what I didn't? I started drinking lager. I couldn't drink bitter.
How in the world do you always work in licorice from your childhood?
So it's my responsibility as the user of it to embrace that risk.
Agreed.
Because there will be a specification in the licorice and in the pint of beer that it says it's made up of these attributes and it'll do this to your stomach once you put it in there.
For sure.
In the same way that there will be for the thermal road repair or for whatever else it might be. So those two things together solve the conundrum.
But we haven't had in all of the bodies that exist, unless someone knows better than me, we haven't had, we see it in the procurement side, but we don't necessarily see it fully in the asset side of what is the risk of doing something new and what does it mean for us. At least I don't see that. I mean, you see it every now and then in Highways magazine and stuff, but that risk piece seems to be something that, when unsure, do nothing. And how do we break the back of that?
So what is risk in the terms of a... So you talk about who holds the risk. What is the risk?
More times than not, it's not financial.
I wasn't being churlish. I mean...
No.
So if you have a supplier who has invested many hours and pounds in a product or service, he gets it to a point where he thinks it will deliver what he's promised based on the specification he gives you.
Correct.
Yeah, they share that risk, although it's the clients, because we've bought that, procured it, we're going to use it, and if it fails, it's out there or it's not done its job.
Mm-hmm.
They want it to fail less than we do. So
commercially, they do, yes.
Yeah, because it's crippling. They don't want
Correct.
it not to work. That's the point. So people get hung up on, well, say hung up on risks, the one way of putting it, but they just completely focused on risk and then fall back to going to buy licorice that they bought, instead of going to a different shop or a different variety of licorice.
That leads to lager drinking.
Yeah.
No, you're spot on. So again, what is risk? So the financial piece of risk is insurable, right? We've spent huge amounts of time dealing with the insurance issue around all of this. What does it cost? The different types of insurance. Can we specify insurance? You can do all of that. I think the risk, Ian, that I've seen in the conversations especially with the buyers who are medium and smaller councils, cities, districts, they don't know reputationally. They're saying, what does that mean for me? What is my risk? And it's generally not the financial.
No, it would go back to the outcomes.
It's the outcomes. How does it fit? Why am I doing something different? And I've had some fascinating conversations with folks saying, if your portfolio holder is not signing up to do something different for the outcome, for the beyond the financial, I don't know how you're going to sell that. So I do think that there is doing different for different sake isn't what we're advocating. Different for a financial whole life cycle cost as opposed to stopping the immediate pain, whatever that immediate pain is. And I go back to rare as an innovation here will exactly solve your pain tomorrow.
No.
I don't see innovation as being a Band-Aid.
No.
So I guess starting to wrap up the session sort of really is, I think what we wanted to do is to help you understand that what we're trying to do at Elcrig, spearheaded by Martin and others, is try and help local authorities, suppliers, innovators, startups become part of that sort of economic piece, really, which is what this is all about as much as anything. Now, Jason is here for 2 days. There are plenty of opportunities to have private conversations. We know there are some challenges that people want to have sort of off-the-record conversations. Jason is here for that for 2 days. And actually, you've been helping lots of conversations in that space, haven't you?
Yeah. It's been a joy.
Glad you said that.
Well, it has. I mean, it has given of the breadth of different. So to begin these conversations, as innovation is relative to the organization and the commercial arrangements that they have, we've had some folks on the South Coast say, I'm not using that. I just ask my tier one, I want that, and it happens. And we haven't advocated that they shouldn't do that. If your commercial arrangements allow you to specify buy without problem through a tier one contract that has an innovation clause, do it. But from what I can tell, that's maybe a third or less of buyers. So the questions that I'd never intend to instill frustration, but what do you want? Why do you want it? As opposed to, using, I saw it, I want it. You still have to have the justification of how it fits with your strategy, and you still have to think of it holistically, in my view. So the positives is that it gives a greater frequency of allowing you to do different things than buying off the half a dozen frameworks that you've always done over and over and over again. But you have to answer the question with me, what's different? Why does it need to be different? And what benefit do we get without writing a business case? You can buy it without writing a business case.
And I think that's the sort of like the final sort of almost point really, is that's the critical point, isn't it? Yep. I mean, I can't stress enough just how many local authorities that you've been working with, how many suppliers and innovators. And I think actually, Martin, as you know, I mean, it's taken a long time to move the dial, but if we weren't going to do it, who else was going to do it, really?
I think so. I think, quite frankly, Elcrig, its role in innovation, the missing piece, I do believe, is route to market at pace, at scale, that's not bound by arbitrary measures, that fits. I mean, I'm just amazed walking through here, Paula. Well done to you and the team. brands I've not seen, services I've not ever encountered or specified. I was going through actually asking people, if I wanted to buy your stuff, how would I buy it? I've yet to have anybody over there actually answer the question. But hopefully by the end of the service, the end of the conference, they will know where to go to, shall we say, have their services procured.
Yeah, and that's why we brought startups this year. That's why we've got universities this year. That's why we've reached out to other organisations. And actually, this feels like a really nice final point. At the end of the day, the I in LCRIG is innovation. So, that is bound to be an area that we're going to continue to work on. We'll continue to get feedback from local authorities, and we'll continue to work on FAQs or think pieces, or these are the problems happening, and this is part of a longer journey that we will be on, really. So I just want to finish by saying, Jason is here for 2 days. Use him in the nicest possible way. And thank you very much, Jason. That's been brilliant.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.